like to call to order the meeting of the Lake Forest Community High School District 115 Board of Education meeting. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Carey?
Here.
Mrs. Snoblin?
Here.
Mr. Edson? Mr. Bergner?
Here.
Mr. Block?
Here.
Mr. Scribner? Mrs. Gola?
Here. Thank you very much. Tonight, under the President's Report, I just want to give a heartfelt congratulations to our graduates, to the class of 2011. The high school hosted a wonderful commencement exercise at the beginning of the month, which I know is put together with Jay Hoffman and Linda Barrett and a cast of thousands to make sure that our students and our families, our grandparents, aunts and uncles, and community members can come and share in the celebration. If you attended or if you had an opportunity to see a video of it, you'll know that this was a really successful, hardworking, nice group of young people. And I think as a community we should be proud of the work they did and the work and the support of their parents and the work and the support of the community members at large, because they are all of our children. This is our high school, and I think everyone should be congratulated for the work that we've done. But a special thanks to them, and congratulations to them, and to you, Mr. Hoffman, and best wishes to all of them in their future. As far as the board goes, we will be having our board workshop next month, and the dates are set. Please have your superintendent evaluation and your board self-evaluation back to us by June 28th. Mark your calendars. And that concludes the President's report. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Griffith for the superintendent's report.
Okay, Madam President, members of the board, thank you for being here tonight. Well, I think I'm going to forego any superintendent's report and just go to Principal Hoffman from the high school.
I would like to thank Caroline Stride, who sat with us for much of the year in our board meeting. She gave a wonderful speech at graduation, as did Catherine Kessman. And congratulations go to Tim Haskett as being named the Distinguished Educator for this year. We had 26 students, senior students, write essays about their teachers, and we had 2 teachers actually get 3 essays from 3 different students, 2 different ones. So it was a nice showing, and we're very proud of all 16 of them, and Tim was named the Distinguished Educator, and he has certainly earned it. Thanks again to Harry for the weather. He did another wonderful, masterful job. And really thanks to our crew, which worked very hard to put on the graduation with all the setup and takedown and everything in between. Our custodial staff, our maintenance staff, our grounds staff, they all did a wonderful job. Carol White has led them greatly, and we appreciate all their help, and they're really the people behind the scenes that really make it happen. Special thanks go out, though, to 420 of our best friends, as we did have 420 graduates, and we wish them well, and we'll hear about them in the future, and we look forward to that. So thanks. It was a great day.
That concludes the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hoffman and Dr. Griffith. Moving on, we have public participation. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak to the board on a matter that is not on the agenda this evening, they can be recognized by the board. Is there anyone? Mrs. Falcone?
Good evening to the board. Can you hear my voice? You can, good. This is addressed to Dr. Griffith. As a taxpayer who's just paid their latest tax bill, I'm here once again to protest the extravagance of the Chinese program at the high school. As I understand, there are four students only in a Mandarin 1 class in the high school. The normal requirement for a class, I understand, is 13 students. So, Dr. Griffith, why is this class allowed to continue with only 4 students in it? As taxpayers, are we paying for one teacher to teach a single Mandarin class? Is this how our taxes are being utilized? By paying questionably certified Chinese teachers who have their apartments, utilities, cars, gas, and whatever else paid out of the school supplies account? Does this account need to be outside audited? There are 8 students currently taking Mandarin in District 67's 8th grade. How many from that group of 8 students will take Mandarin when they enter high school, if they stay in this school district? Will this be yet another class that doesn't meet the necessary requirements? As I see this, Dr. Griffith, I understand how this is really costing the Lake Forest taxpayers $24,000 per head for a high school that apparently does not receive good representation at top American universities. Instead of concentrating on improving it, it appears that we're catering to and employing Chinese teachers with questionable certification at great expense, sometimes for 4 students. It would be interesting to find out the financial state of the high school before you, Dr. Griffith, arrived and compare it with what it is now, when it has a $1.5 million deficit and no cash reserves left, I understand. I was of the belief that this amount included the District 67 deficit of nearly $1 million, but apparently that is a separate issue, isn't it? And by the way, how long has this Lake Forest High School been placed on the watch list by the Illinois State Board of Education financial warning list? And could you please answer that question in the public for the record? Thank you.
Would you like to leave a copy of your statement with us so that we can respond? It would be helpful that since you did ask so many questions. Oh, okay. All right, well, then we'll have a few responses.
Okay, thank you for those questions. I think a couple of short answers, but I'd be glad to put this all in writing to each specific question. But generally speaking, the Lake Forest High School tax rate is the lowest tax rate in the state of Illinois. If you take a $1 million home in Libertyville, and you take a $1 million home in Lincolnshire, or a $1 million home in Highland Park, or Wilmette, or Glencoe, or Winnetka, or any other community, that $1 million home will be paying about 25% more in taxes, school taxes, than here in Lake Forest. So the tax rate here in Lake Forest is literally the best, or certainly among the very best tax rates in the state of Illinois, maybe in the entire Midwest.
Could you kindly quantify what that tax rate is in other schools? Because we know what the tax rate is for District Whitman, which is roughly 60% of the property taxes. So that's the question.
Okay.
Excuse me, but you haven't been recognized by the chair, and so if, we'll know that's a response time, and then when he's finished, and we do have an overhead that might be helpful.
Yep. If you live in Highland Park School District, your tax bill, 70 to 71% of your tax bill goes to the schools. If you live in Lake Forest, roughly 50% of your tax bill goes to the public schools, both school districts. It is significantly higher in our neighboring communities. That's just one answer to a specific question. On the other hand, and here we have a chart here, I'm going to ask Alan Albus to step over. These are numbers from Lake County, numbers that you can find on the Lake County website. So Alan, if you would show all of us how that really works.
Sure. Well, first 2 comments, because this is a chart from when we did our levy presentation in December. But in that presentation also was a figure from Lake County that said, and this is from the county, school districts typically are 66% of your tax bill. In Lake Forest, they're 50% of your tax bill. So what we tried to show with this chart is you can see where it says Lake Forest District 115, a home worth $1 million has what's called an equalized assessed value of about $333,000. The 2009 tax rate for District 115 was $1.06. That generated $3,560 in taxes. If you take that $1 million home and move it to Highland Park, the tax rate for Highland Park High Schools is $1.74. That means the taxes are $5,821, or an increase of $2,200, which is a 63% increase. That same house in Stevenson's school district would pay a tax rate of $2.18 per every $100 of assessed valuation, generating taxes of $7,276, or $3,700 more than what Lake Forest High School is generating. So you can go across the board. It didn't capture all the communities that Dr. Griffith mentioned, but it's representative of the most recent comparative data that was out there.
Thank you, Mr. Albus. Is there anybody else, no, I'm sorry, anyone else, we'll take turns. Anyone else in the audience who has a question for the board on an item that is not on the agenda? Okay, did you have one more question?
Of all of these schools that are presented, how many are teaching a class with only 4 students in it?
Okay, we're trying to look up the enrollment for next year for our Mandarin program at the high school. Actually, Mr. Hoffman's doing that right now, but it's lumpy. We have a Mandarin teacher who is less expensive as a guest teacher, so they're a guest teacher, than a regular teacher at the high school. So the smaller salary allows us to implement the program for a guest teacher who comes to us from another part of the country, and we do provide a small housing supplement, like $150 a month, that the teacher then has to pay. I'm answering your question. Teacher has to pay, of course, most of their own rent. There is some small supplement that we pay to assist the teacher. Net cost is less than having a regular teacher. Now, the size of the classes do vary. We do have a small class, but we have other classes that are larger, and then we have much larger populations coming into the high school, also from Deer Path Middle School. So it's lumpy is the answer. We're looking up the enrollment right now. I'd be glad to give it to you when I get that. That's why I think if you would send me your specific questions, I'll go ahead and have those filled out for you. I know you still won't like the answers, but I'll get you the answers to your specific questions, okay?
Okay, is there anyone else at this time who has questions for the board? All right, Mrs. Falcone, you've had 2 opportunities, and normally someone in the audience only has 1, but we would be very happy, as we said, if you would send us a written copy of your questions, or either make an appointment to see Mr. Albus or Dr. Griffith. We would be happy to answer all of your questions in person. Okay, seeing no one, we will move on to our board committee reports. Yeah, if you would like to go to the microphone and ask your question, give us your name and address, please.
Name is Basil Falcone, 930 Lake Road. I'm not going to take more than 3 minutes, but wish to simply summarize what many residents feel, that there seems to be a lack of transparency and accountability as it relates to a lot of the expenses that relate to the various points that were articulated not only by my wife but in past sessions. And perhaps some of these points may smack of mismanagement of these expenses. And so consequently, I'm going to ask the board if you will submit financial statements to auditors that I may have called you, those who are professionals, to review those documents. Thank you. And can you respond to that?
I think Jim?
Mr. Falcone, we already have an audit performed annually. I think if there are, by an independent auditing firm, that was reported on 3 3 or 4 meetings ago. But if you have specific questions about a matter of how we're operating, I think that coming in for a meeting would be quite helpful. When you start getting into a specific class size and enrollment, that's one question out of a myriad of questions related to a Chinese program. Individually, the answer may not make sense. When you put it in the context of a full-time employee here, perhaps teaching 4 students does make sense. Perhaps it makes sense over a multi-year cycle. I think you'd be better off if you came, not engaging more outsiders to look at something they'll have difficulty understanding, but coming in and actually just having a face-to-face conversation with the folks that have got the answers. We've got nothing to hide. So come on in. I mean, this is an awkward situation to have it just by virtue of the board and the method of operation of a board, particularly with cameras, and I know that Mrs. Thorner is finding this amusing, but detailed questions require detailed answers. Not 3-minute sound bites, but detailed answers. And I think an orderly dialogue would be helpful. So I welcome you. If you'd like to come to a Finance Committee meeting, I'd welcome that as well, because again, we've got nothing to hide.
I would also like to remind you, and I don't think I've seen either of you, Mr. and Mrs. Falcone, or you, Mrs. Thorner, our budget is put on display every year for a full month for everyone in the community to view. And then we have a budget hearing. Have you had an opportunity in the past dozen or so years you've lived here to review the budgets?
44 years.
And have you come in every year to review the budgets when we put them on display? I would like to invite you to come. And that'll be August, is that right? July? Okay. No, thank you. But this is an invitation. Okay, you have not been recognized by the chair, and you cannot speak from the center of the audience. So we're going to move on with, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off. No, I'm going to have, public participation is over. Okay, moving on, we have our board committee reports. The first is Board Education. Nikki Snowbin.
The Education Committee has not met since our last monthly meeting. We decided that we will not have a spring meeting as we anticipated, so I think our next meeting will be in late August or early September. I'm also pleased to say that our 2 community members who've served on the Education Committee have both agreed to stay on, one for 1 more year, well actually probably both of them for 1 more year. So I'm very pleased about that. I think we have excellent community participation on that committee.
Thank you, Ms. Snoblin. Next, we have our Board Operations Committee. Dick Block.
Thank you, Mrs. Golan. The Board Operations Committee met on June 1st at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the main items of discussion were the existing pilot community partnership agreement that we have with 3 community partners here at the varsity athletic field at West Campus, and expanding that. You might remember, fellow board members, a year ago when we approved this pilot program, it was for 3 years for a maximum of 5 partners, and we talked about moving from those 3 that we currently have to the full 5 by this fall sports season. We did, as a committee, approve a list of potential partners. You might remember that one of the provisions of the agreement is that the board approve all partners through the Booster Club. And as I say, we did approve a list at the Operations Committee level to include Allstate, Brunswick, Chiefs, Forest and Bluff Magazine, Harris Bank, Lake Forest Bank and Trust, Lake Forest Lake Bluff Patch, and Solo Company to be among those 2 additional members of the pilot program. In addition, we discussed the mural project that I think you were all made aware of at our last board meeting, and we covered in some detail at our previous Operations Committee meeting. That project is moving along. I think Dr. Griffith is going to make some comments on it later. Dr. Griffith and I both believe that this can be folded into the existing pilot program framework. We're talking about a project that would yield approximately another $25,000 a year in revenue over and above the existing community partnership program. Obviously, there would be costs associated with implementing it, and I'll let Dr. Griffith address those, but that's another project that we would hope to come before the full board with before the end of the summer so that it could be implemented in time for the fall program, and we could receive the benefits of those additional revenues. On that same general topic, we talked about creating a strategic plan that would allow us to try to access additional alternative revenue streams from our other support organizations at Lake Forest High School, to include the Lake Forest High School Foundation, Applause, PALS, et cetera. And we'll discuss that at our next Operations Committee meeting in more detail, but the preliminary plan is to invite each of these other support groups in for a meeting with the full Operations Committee and to get their take on what might be possible and how we might be able to work together to implement something of the same template, of the same kind of framework that we've been successful with the Boosters Club. We talked at considerable length again about the East Campus Outdoor Facility Project. Moving on to another subject, you might remember the president of the Boosters Club, Brian Vandenberg, made a presentation at our last board meeting about this project. Since that time, there's been a preliminary cost review by Perkins and Will, which indicates on an order of magnitude basis that the Boosters Club estimate of about $2.5 million, medium case, appears to be reasonably accurate. Soil test work has commenced. That was a big area of cost risk, not so much from the standpoint of stability, because there's not a big load on the soil, but particularly from the standpoint of water runoff and what we might have to do in terms of stormwater drainage. And there's been further work on sort of the quiet phase of the fundraising capability assessment, and we're awaiting further word of all those things. I know the soil test work has been completed and the results are being reviewed, but at this point in time, the Operations Committee doesn't have the details of that. We talked about the renewal of the Honeywell Instant Alert program, and there'll be a further discussion of that here at this board meeting, but suffice it to say that the Operations Committee was on board with that renewal. There was discussion, there was an overview of the transportation contract, but the committee was not provided the details of the competitive bid process with Olson and what have you, so we were not in a position to approve it. And we look forward to doing that at the next Operations Committee meeting, and for that being on the board agenda for the July board meeting. We discussed our dashboard objective and talked about the possibility of creating a study group of community members to do some legwork for us in gathering information about what other high-performing schools are disclosing on their websites and elsewhere about their key parameters, and that'll be under further discussion and review, and hopefully we'll reach a resolution as to what and how we might go forward there at our next Operations Committee meeting. But we are interested in the views of the Finance Committee and the Education Committee as to how you would feel about doing some background work just to see what other schools are doing and providing us with a template against which to judge our current effort and how we might be able to further enhance it. We received a facilities update from Carol White, and nothing of a serious nature to report there. We will discuss at our next meeting the possibility of modifying our Operations Committee charter to expand it to include the communications function and the IT hardware and services function at the school, as well as the security function explicitly. Those areas are not specifically addressed under any of the existing committees. They seem to be a natural for the Operations Committee, and we look forward to making a recommendation there to you at the July board meeting. We haven't set an exact date for our next meeting, but we're tentatively planning something for the last week in June, pending everyone's availability. That's it, Madam President.
Todd, did you have anything to add to that?
I don't know if you mentioned, but we have a spot.
Thank you. Yeah, I did want to mention that. We do have an opening coming up on the Operations Committee for a community member. One of our current members is terming out in the early fall. The vacancy is already posted on the school's website, so I'd like to encourage anyone who has an interest in volunteering to help the school and to learn more about the school's operations to click on the link there at the website and submit an application, and believe me, we'd be glad to talk to you about coming on board. So thank you, Todd.
Dick, in regard to evaluating the dashboard and looking at other districts, I think we need to involve the Education Committee in that as well, so we should probably talk about that.
Fine.
Okay, Board Finance Committee, Jim Carey.
The Finance Committee met on May 26th. We reviewed a few of the contracts that are on tonight's approval or action item list. One of them was the Olson Transportation contract, and I think by virtue of timing or whatever, we saw the bid information showing that Olson had competed against several other companies, and the Finance Committee recommended approval of Olson based on that successful bid process. We also saw the Honeywell Instant Alert contract renewal. I would just say that these two contracts and ones we've approved at other meetings reflect an aggressive effort. Nancy, I'd like you to get this down. Reflect an aggressive effort on the part of the board and the management to look for opportunities to reduce the cost of administering the school and providing services to our students. In the case of Olson Transportation, a significant savings will be derived by not only 67, 115, but also 65. I think in the case of the Honeywell contract, we'd already had a very attractive rate. We improved on it. And I think it was at the last meeting we talked about a renegotiation of the janitorial services contract. Again, a significant savings to the district and therefore the taxpayers by virtue of the work that was done by the administration. At this meeting, we also had an update from Alan and Jennifer about the voluntary separation program. Maybe one of you could chime in here. Is it 9 or 10 people? 10 people who elected to take the package offered. This has a benefit to the school district for the current year and for future years. And again, I would basically point you towards this being part of the ongoing effort to manage our expenses. Spent a lot of time in the meeting talking about where we stand for the current year. Alan or Jennifer, I would ask you where we stand relative to the $1.5 million deficit that was talked about a few months ago, and where we think we are with 15 or 16 days to go.
The difficulty in projecting the year end has a lot to do with state revenues. And I know, Jim, you and I exchanged some emails about some ed-red material that went out and what that really means for the district. And to be honest, I don't think we're going to know until July 1, until the clock strikes midnight on June 30th and we know whether or not the state made another quarterly payment or not. Because if they do, that's a couple $100,000 swing. The other factor in there has to do with our special education. In January, that was trending very hot. But the last several months, the bills are much more reasonable, but that can ebb and flow. So that's something we monitor too, and we'll work with Julie on and try to end. So as far as the 1.5 we projected in January, we've tried to be aggressive. We tried to delay things where we could or cut where we could. So I think the deficit for this year will be less than that. The things that you had mentioned about GCA, the voluntary separation program, the other staffing reductions we've made. I'm pretty confident when we present a budget to you in July, it will be balanced for the FY12 school year.
Thank you. And how much right now does the state of Illinois owe us for the current year?
I'm going to guess about $400,000 to $500,000, but we can figure it out more precisely because it's in the packets
But
tonight, I'm
ballpark, that's
ballparking
what
it.
we're looking at them owing us with, again, about 16 days left before clock strikes 12. Thank you. That was it. Our next meeting, I think, is scheduled for sometime perhaps late this month as we just get closer to the end of our fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask any specific questions about our finances, operations, or educational goals at this time from the presentations that were just given? Any clarifications or factual information you'd like us to share with you? Okay, seeing no one, we'll move on.
Madam President, I would like to make a comment. I really wanted to make it there at the close of the public comment section, but unfortunately things sort of left it inconvenient to do so at that time, so I won't. But just for the benefit of full disclosure, those tax rates that were shown to the audience and through the TV, while certainly accurate, shouldn't be confused with expenditures or revenues that the school receives. Those tax rates are imputed values based on the equalized assessed value for all of our taxing district, for all of Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, and Knollwood. And one of the key reasons those rates are as low as they are is the high value of the properties in Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, and Knollwood, and not a direct reflection of the amount of money that the school receives or spends in and of itself. So, I just think it's important to point that out.
Okay, moving on. We have a report on our community partnership program. Dr. Griffith?
Okay. Actually, board members, Mrs. Falcone asked the question about our enrollment at the high school for Mandarin. Principal Hoffman did just go to his report of those students who are enrolled for the fall of 2011. And we have 18 students enrolled in freshman or Mandarin 1, the Mandarin 1 program. And we have 54 students enrolled in Mandarins 2 and 3. So our Mandarin teacher will be teaching at this date 72 students next year, so a total of 72. That's very consistent with many of our other teachers with respect to specialty coursework. I'll put that information in a letter to Mrs. Falcone. Ask her also if she could get me her other questions, because I'd like to answer those for her too.
Can I just say, Dr. Griffith, that the Mandarin program is something that the Education Committee is going to want to be brought up to date on in the fall, and I'm encouraged to hear those numbers because it sounds like the program is going as well as you anticipated when we kind of changed direction with that a couple years ago. So nothing occurs in a vacuum. We do have our committees who evaluate all of these programs, and that is one that is on the radar for taking another look at in the fall.
Also, you're probably already planning to do this, but I think it's helpful for those kinds of things to be put on the website, Dr. Griffith, to the extent that you're going to reply to a question that was asked in public at a board meeting. I think that's the only reasonable way to reach the same audience that the question reached. So if you could do that, I think it would be a help.
That's a really good suggestion. I would also say that I think the enrollment in Mandarin next year will exceed our enrollment in French in our elementary grade levels, so it's actually one of our fastest growing languages right now in our community. I think that's a good idea to put information out to help answer questions like that. Okay, board members, I don't mean to elaborate too much more on what Chairman Dick Block presented from the Board Operations Committee. But I think just in way of summary, this is mostly a big thanks to our parents, our parent community, and the Booster Club of Lake Forest High School. On September 7th, 2010, the Board of Education took action to approve a Lake Forest High School Community Partnership Program pilot that allowed company logos to be presented at the West Campus varsity field on field windscreens in return for financial contributions to the Lake Forest High School Athletic Department. This initiative to date has been quite a success. We've received little or no negative comment about the logos, and the contributions have helped, indeed, various athletic department projects. To date, the partnership has raised $45,500 that is being used to support student awards, new scoreboards, professional development for coaches, sport participation fees for students of need, and other worthwhile initiatives. This is a 3-year pilot agreement that will, over the 3-year term, it looks like it will raise $135,000 from the 3 partners, with the possibility of adding even 2 more during this 3-year term. In addition to the financial support provided by the partnership program, the Booster Club has developed a second initiative to promote student excellence through the display of student images on the back panels of the gymnasium at West Campus. The display of these student panels will tastefully celebrate student athletic activity and raise additional funds to support our athletic department. The panels are in the final stage of development and will include a reference to our music programs and student scholarship at the request of the Board of Education. Board members, you may recall that we discussed this last year. This has been reviewed by the Operations Committee, actually on several occasions, a couple of occasions, as Chairman Block reported. And I think, board members, it will be very tastefully done. The sponsor has not yet been determined. It does appear it's going to be a local institution that may have interest in this. The actual dollars involved to support the athletic department, because we've been slashing their budgets as we have every other department, is yet to be determined. It's somewhat under negotiation. But I anticipate it'll be a helpful dollar amount too. So I feel like we're ready to go on the project, pending the finding a sponsor who would present this. I think it'll be quite beautiful and tasteful project. Board members, are there any questions?
I do recall in the last fall when we discussed it, it was uncertain at that time exactly what those murals would depict. And in our mock-up that we have here, there are some that show individual students, and then there are others that show sort of a representative image of a student for each sport. I think our only concern at that time was that if you highlight individual students who've achieved something remarkable, is that a permanent fixture? How often would that need to be changed? So I don't know if there's been a decision yet about how that's going to go, or which of these mock-ups represents the final plan.
That's good. That's actually 2 questions. I think the final selection will be a mix of panels that represent student activity like the band, or perhaps a volleyball team, as well as student award winners themselves. So I think the final selection for that is not yet made, but I wanted to make sure, board members, that you saw representative samples of what those would look like. And then secondly, I think with respect to any individual award winners, that those panels would be changed out on an annual basis. None of these panels are permanently affixed to the building. So I anticipate some will be annually replaced, and others would probably be more on the 3-year term of agreement that the board has. In that manner, I think it may be negotiated how long the contract is with the company involved. So as soon as that is completed, I'll get word back to the board, and I can report in a subsequent board meeting what the outcome of that would be.
In my opinion, all of the mock-ups are tasteful and attractive, so I look forward to seeing what we end up with.
Just to elaborate a little bit further, the Operations Committee has not yet seen details and is very interested in the details. There's been considerable discussion about the panels. One of the things that is of key interest to the Operations Committee, I can assure you, is that these murals be a net generator of revenues. We don't want to be replacing all 7 panels, as Harry was just pointing out, every year, and chewing up all the revenue that we're talking about bringing in. And we do want, I don't want to give a percentage or anything, but we want the panels to reflect the broad generality of excellence in not just athletics, but in all endeavors at the high school. Now, clearly, it's in an athletic venue, and it will probably most prominently feature athletics, but we haven't seen a final mock-up again in the end, and we look forward to seeing that, and the Operations Committee is keenly interested in the revenues and in displaying the broad spectrum of excellence at the high school. And just to add some dollar numbers, the existing 3 partners that we have last year generated just under $50,000 in new revenue. $45,500 in the exact number in revenue. The potential addition of 2 new partners plus a 3rd partner here in the mural project would bring the total to approximately $100,000 a year in ongoing new revenue in support of our primarily athletic activities. So it's, it's not an insubstantial thing, and this is why we're so interested in seeing what we can take from this template and move it into other arenas at the high school tastefully, as has been done at West Campus here.
Although I do think, Mr. Hoffman, maybe you can help me with this. In terms of some of the other disciplines at the high school, there are opportunities for those students to, years ago I think Dr. Griffith said we want to celebrate our successes, opportunities for students in other departments to show off their talents or artwork, or, I mean, there are several venues, right, for all scopes?
There's no doubt that in the construction project, we planned, and now it's come to fruition, a lot of different ways to celebrate kids' success. We have the Academic Wall of Fame. We have the alumni area. We've opened up lots of different showcases to display the awards that kids have gotten in telecom or in art or in many other areas. And also, the Commons is rife with displays even now. We're able to display the artwork and the production of our kids, and no one messes with it. It's pretty cool, and it's great for them and for us. So the school itself is a big celebration of their work, and we're really happy with that.
Good, thank you very much.
And just, board members, just also one final, I do have in front of you the specifications for the size of the lettering, the size of the panels, how the panels would be affixed to the building. So we've got a lot of detail there for you. What we don't have is the final rendering from the Booster Club, but it's going to be some mix of what very similar to what you have now. So as soon as we have that information on the actual final panel look, which again will be very consistent with what you currently have, I'll get that out to everybody. And otherwise, you do have the specifications for the lettering, the panels themselves. So I think the Booster Club has done a really good job of trying to provide us, the Operations Committee and now the Board of Education, pretty thorough information about how this would be set up.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Griffith. Moving on, we have action items. The first is the approval of the Olson Transportation contract, which, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, the Finance Committee has reviewed the project in some detail, and so, board members, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask to table the item for tonight, because we'll finish our discussions with the Operations Committee between now and the July meeting. So we'd ask that we hold back, and then we anticipate bringing the recommendation forward in the July board meeting.
Thank you. Next is the approval of CLIC liability. All right, then I would need a motion to table the approval of the Olson Transportation contract till the next meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to table the approval of the Olson Transportation contract. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next on the action item list is the approval of the CLIC liability policy renewal. Dr. Griffith?
Okay, board members, I'm going to go right to Alan Elbis on the next couple of items for you, action items that will be before you. So if you can just go straight to Alan on that.
Actually, I'll address items 2 and 3 at the same time. CLIC is an acronym for Collective Liability Insurance Cooperative. It's a consortium of school districts. I don't know the exact number, but it's well over 100 right now that pool together to acquire liability and in some cases workers' comp insurance. The advantage of that is that it's governed by it's operated for and governed by school districts. We do contract with A.J. Gallagher to be the administrator on that. So before you tonight are renewals for the upcoming year. The first one is the liability insurance. In the attached recommendation, the final renewal is $121,803, which is a decrease of 2.577%. The second renewal is for the workers' compensation with an annual premium of $156,027. That represents a decrease over the prior year of 15.4306%.
All right, is there a motion to approve the liability policy renewal?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any questions or comments, board members?
I would just note and ask, Alan, the paperwork says 165 other school districts are in the cooperative, just to give the audience some idea of the magnitude that's being covered here. And with that, I'm sure goes a degree of complexity in administering things. So my question, I want to be sensitive to that complexity. But is this bid on a periodic basis, Alan? I know it was not this year, and we were still able to negotiate one-on-one at discount, we being 166 school districts. But is it bid periodically?
They go to market annually. Well, if they lock in something for a multi-year, obviously then that wouldn't. But yes, they go to market often.
And they is Gallagher, acting on behalf of the 100-plus schools.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Snoblin?
Aye.
Mr. Block?
Aye.
Mr. Bergner?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mrs. Golan?
Aye. Motion carries. Are there any questions from the audience on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. Our third action item, and that's approval of the CLIC workers' compensation renewal. Alan, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I covered it in the comments a few moments ago.
All right, board members, do you have any other questions or comments on this? May I have a motion to approve the CLIC workers' compensation renewal?
I move that the Board of Education approve the collective liability insurance cooperative workers' compensation renewal as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Do you have a question, Mr. Block? No. Okay, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Block?
I'm sorry.
We're voting.
Aye.
Block? Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mr. Bergner?
Aye.
Mrs. Snoblin?
Aye.
Mrs. Golan?
Aye, motion carries. Any questions from the audience on that agenda item? Seeing none. Next is the approval of the Honeywell Instant Alert contract renewal. Dr. Griffith?
Okay, board members, the action that you just took, just to reemphasize, the liability insurance contract for next year represents a 2.5% decrease in premium. The liability workers' comp insurance represents a 15.5% reduction in cost, and this next contract does the same thing. The Honeywell Instant Alert System is what we use in our schools to contact our families in cases of emergency or notices of some importance. It can be everything from a school-wide notice of snow day, which we had this year for 2 of them. I remember it was February 3rd and 4th. I will never forget those 2 days.
Consecutive days.
Consecutive days. But on the other hand, our athletic department uses this a lot. We had more than 100 activities canceled this spring due to weather, and so the coaches are able to use Instant Alert on a regular basis to stay in touch with their families. The good news is this contract was renegotiated and with a 29% reduction in total fee. And so the total cost of this has dropped to $3,757 for next year. This is a highly valued service that is relatively inexpensive.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the Honeywell Instant Alert contract renewal?
I move that the Board of Education approve the Honeywell Instant Alert renewal as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments from board members?
Nice job, Ms. Whipple.
Good job. All right, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Snoblin?
Aye.
Mr. Block?
Aye.
Mr. Bergner?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowe?
Aye. Motion carries. Are there any questions from the audience members about the agenda item we just voted on? Thank you. I don't know why I keep looking at you. All right, the next item is the adoption of resolution to transfer interest earnings from debt service fund to education fund. Dr. Griffith?
Okay, our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Alan Albus.
This is a resolution we present on an annual basis. The school code allows, by resolution, the transfer of any interest earnings in a debt service fund to other funds in the district. And so annually in June, we present this. At the end of the year, we make that change or move the money over.
Okay, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Board members, any questions or comments about this? Seeing none, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mr. Bergner?
Aye.
Mrs. Snoblin?
Aye.
Mr. Block?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowe?
Aye. Motion carries. Any questions or comments from audience members? Can we, would you repeat the question?
The question, right, I'll repeat it for the camera. The question was how much of interest was earned to date. To date, it's approximately $14,000. After we post June, $14,000, $15,000 should be the amount.
Okay, it's helpful if you would ask your questions at the microphone because nobody else in the room can hear and it's not getting picked up. Okay, next we have the adoption, we did finish that, right? Adoption resolution for the 2010-2011 budget transfer adjustments. Dr. Griffith?
Okay, Alan Albus, please. Alan, you might just hold on to that microphone.
During the course of the year, budget transfers are made between different accounts with some limitations. We don't allow transfers out of salary accounts, for example, or benefit accounts initiated by the buildings. But it is a management tool to have people more focused because we hold then to the budget numbers. And rather than bring those to the board on an individual basis, we collect those during the course of the year and then present them in summary. As you see by going through the material that's in your book, there are not that many budget transfers that occur, but usually they may occur around a grant. There may be some tweaking in that area. So again, this is something that we present on an annual basis as we come to the close of the year.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other questions or comments on this item from board members?
Yeah, I do have a question, not being a member of the Finance Committee. How does the budget with transfers compare to an estimated actual? Alan, is that really what it's trying to reflect at that given point in time?
No, we really use it as a management tool. When I started my career, I worked in a district where the business official did not allow transfers. So at the end of the year, if a building was out of supply money but needed to buy supplies, they would charge it off to repairs and equipment because they had a budget there. And what happens with that is it taints your actual expenses, because from year to year then you don't truly know where you're spending your money because you're spending it where you have it. And so as I came up and got my CSBO and became a business official, I encourage budget transfers because it makes people more accountable. Don't overcharge a budget. If you have other accounts, move the money around, but then we have an accurate picture of where money's being spent at the end of the year. So we use it, and Jay uses them at times, but really we use them around grants. I don't want to give the impression that we're doing this a lot. As you can see, looking at the papers here, there's very few transfers.
Yeah, no,
that
I noticed
occur.
that, and I noticed they were both positive and negative. I mean, in some cases, money was being taken away from a particular account, and in others, it was being added, and as you point out, they're pretty few and far between, and not, a great deal of dollars, so.
I'll give an example. If a team makes the playoffs and they're traveling a lot, so our transportation costs go up, Tim Burkhalter might look at his supply accounts and say, I can squeeze that a little bit and move that money over to cover it. So we don't get in this situation of charging supplies to a travel account. We don't want to do that. And also on our end in the central office, when expenses are coming through, we can see that there are funds to pay for it. So again, I'll reiterate, we'd use it more as a management tool and a financial discipline on the budget.
It's sounding more and more like an estimated actual, though.
Yeah, I think it gets a little more granular, but yeah,
Okay.
probably not far off.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, board members? It's been moved and seconded. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Black?
Aye.
Mr. Bergner?
Aye.
Mrs. Snoblin?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mrs. Golan?
Aye. Motion carries. Any questions from the audience? Seeing none, we will move on to the approval of the Human Resources Report from Dr. Cyrus.
Board members, just by way of introduction, this is a rather bittersweet moment. 4 years ago, Dr. Michael Cyrus came to us from Stevenson High School and brought a level of expertise to our organization that we have greatly benefited from. Mike has been both very diligent about helping our staff adhere to our protocols, requirements of teacher contract that we have, as well as all other state mandated expectations for the many tasks that this office is responsible for. But in addition to that, Mike Cyrus brought a fresh look at how we can bring professional development into our organization to assist us with improving instructional practices in a way that our teachers would embrace and in fact do so with some enthusiasm. And hence we have a gentleman, Dr. Jim Paulson, who is periodically in our district, including this week, working with our high school teachers on best practices of various kinds in our classrooms. It's been extremely successful. Mike has been a colleague to all of us, a good partner for us, and it's a bittersweet moment because Mike is going on to become the principal and also superintendent of a school district in, of all places, a place called Bangkok, Thailand. And tonight is his last meeting before the Board of Education. And I just thought you would like to know that. And Mike, as you know from your colleagues, and I know from myself, and perhaps President Golan would like to say a word, or members yourself also, it's bittersweet because you really will be missed. Thank you.
Well, Thank you, Dr. Griffith and members of the board. I probably was aiming to conclude with words like this, but I do want to thank you for the opportunity to work here. It's been really the highlight of my professional career to be here. I've learned so much watching Dr. Griffith being part of such a high-performing organization that you all had, that this has been an education in itself. It really has. And I really don't want to leave. I absolutely love it here. I love our teachers. I love our community. I love the parents, the kids, to see the work that they do when I'm in the high school. It thrills me. That's what it's all about. And this is why I went into my family business, which is education, and to end my career here in the United States at here, what I really believe is the finest high school on the North Shore. I'm the luckiest man alive. I really am. And I thank you for your support and your challenge that you've given to me these 4 years. And I'm going to miss you all, and I'm going to miss working here. So thank you. As far as my real report, before I get into it, I just wanted to take just a moment to dispel what I think is kind of an unfortunate perception, perhaps from the public part of the meeting, about our Chinese teachers. Our Chinese teachers are fully certified as far as the state of Illinois is concerned. They hold provisional teaching licenses, which means that they're good to go. A provisional license, though, goes to someone who's been educated and trained as a teacher in another state or in a foreign country. So we also have a hire last month who was from the obscure and exotic corner of the United States called Ohio, that's on that exact same kind of a certificate. And basically what it says is that you, by virtue of being trained in Ohio or being trained in Britain or in China, you probably haven't taken the Illinois Constitution test, or you may be missing a health class or something like this. So that gives the individual at least 2 years to get caught up to speed, but you can't get that certificate unless you're trained as a teacher someplace else. So I hope our Chinese teachers aren't watching cable, or if they are, they're tuned in to American Idol or something like that, because we have teachers that are trained at the one that we have at the high school right now is trained at the Beijing Foreign Languages University, which is probably the Harvard of foreign language education in China. So she holds a master's degree from that institution. So we really are lucky that we're getting such quality people to begin with, and then they're getting further training here in the United States at Michigan State University, which in my experience is one of the finest teacher preparation universities in the Midwest. So it's a great program. We've got fully certified teachers, and I wouldn't want anyone to think anything else, that these are really high quality individuals. So
Mike, do you want to say something about the cost also?
And yes, the cost is, I hate to say this, because it is actually what we contract for these teachers through Michigan State. They're they're the actual employer of these teachers. We do something similar with NSSED. We have teachers in our buildings that are contracted through this outside body. The cost to us for those teachers is slightly, our starting salary for a teacher here with a master's degree now in our district is about $55,000. I think our bill to Michigan State to pay for these teachers with master's degree plus is $45,000. So right there is a $10,000 savings for the years that while they're in preparation at Michigan. As Harry pointed out, because it's difficult to find an apartment in Lake Forest at a and you know the teachers probably are not making that full $45,000 if we're paying their employer that. So it's difficult for them to rent a market rate apartment in Lake Forest. So we do provide a small subsidy for them, but that's basically the only thing that we would provide to the teachers directly. So it is very cost effective to do this, and the more that we contract out, the more we save. So, but the best part of the program is the fact that they're getting this intensive training at Michigan while they're here, working for us too. So, beyond that, on the regular human resources report, it's we've finished our hiring for next year, and I'm happy to say that this is one thing that I'm leaving completely set, and I know it'll be fine by the time that we're all hired up and ready to go for the fall. Important milestone for our one of our college and post-high school counselors, Denise Brown. She's being offered a 5th year of employment, so she's become a tenured member of the staff. I think we're very fortunate to have her. She's actually left Lake Forest to become a college counselor at Evanston Township High School and returned to us, and especially as we've changed our model of how we deliver, to have an extra experienced college counselor, I think has been a huge benefit to us. So other than that, that concludes my report, and I just want to thank you again for all your support and for putting a roof over my head these 4 years. Thank you.
And Mike, we would like to thank you. Your level of compassion for the people who work with you, your accuracy, your professionalism has changed this job in this district forever, and we wish you only the very best. Thank you.
It's really been an honor. Thank you.
I also want to thank you for your closing remarks. I think that it's easy to go out in the community and hear things and not have the facts, but we are transparent and we are open, and we do have email and we have phone numbers. And so when you hear things like erroneous numbers or student count or whatever, please call the head office, call Dr. Griffith. He'll direct you to the person who can best answer your questions. And if you need some kind of transcript to back up those facts, we are more than happy to provide those.
I think context is a key too, because earlier today we heard some facts that were not accurate, but even accurate facts taken out of context can be made to sound absurd or inappropriate. So it's always a good idea to make that phone call, try to get the context surrounding the fact that you may have heard. It's not to say that we couldn't improve certain things, and of course we always want to hear the public's opinion, but it is really important not to pull facts out of context and, you know, pass them along as the whole story, because they're not.
Thank you, Nikki. With that, is there a motion to approve the Human Resources Report? Loud and clear. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Let's send off Dr. Mike. All right. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mr. Bergner?
Aye.
Mr. Block?
Aye.
Mrs. Snoblin?
Aye.
Mrs. Golan?
Aye. Motion carries. Next, we have the consent agenda. Is there any item that a board member would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, the consent agenda tonight includes the approval of financial report and schedule of checks written, approval of minutes from a regular meeting of May 10th, 2011, and minutes of an executive session of May 10th, 2011, the approval of designation of depositories, the adoption of annual prevailing wage, the approval of amendment to shared service intergovernmental agreement for West Campus, and the destruction of audio recordings from August 4th, 2009. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Golan?
Yes,
I
I'm
do have
sorry.
a question about one of the items. I don't want to remove it from the agenda because I suspect the answer is reasonably simple. I just don't know what it is. In the proposed amendment to the intergovernmental agreement with District 67, which involves the prepayment of monies owed us for the administrative office space here at West Campus for District 67. There's an adjustment for something called generated interest earnings of about $21,500 credited back to 67. And I'm just curious what that is and how that fits with the original intent of the agreement.
Jim, would you like to answer that?
When the original agreement was struck with District 67, it included the fact that interest would not be charged over the life of the repayment period. And again, it was a $1 million amount that was owed from District 67 to District 115. The logic was that 115 had the use without any charge of the Deer Path campus for, I think it was 2 summers. And at that point in time, we thought that it was fair to not charge District 67 interest and get into too much kind of intramural calculation of interest. That was the decision at that point in time. Recently, we've had discussions with the Finance Committee of District 67 and asked if they would reconsider and pay off the $550,000 that would be owed to us, or that is owed to us, and that would have been paid over the next several years. We thought that it was in the best interest of both districts that, one, we try to accelerate the recovery of those amounts to help us improve our reserve position at the 115 level, We also realized that by doing that, District 67 would be foregoing the opportunity to have interest earnings on that balance. Alan went to an outside party and asked them to calculate what the net present value would be of giving those monies up to us 5 or 6 years early. And the net impact was that we reduced the amount owed by about $21,000. While we're giving that up, logically, we ought to be able to earn that over the next 5 years, since we will have the money and we can invest it. So it was viewed by, I think, all the parties, including our legal counsel, that this was a fair settlement of an arrangement, fair to both districts, fair to the taxpayers of both districts, and those are different parties. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, may I have a roll call vote for the consent agenda?
Mrs. Snoblin?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mr. Block?
Aye.
Mrs. Golan?
Aye. Motion carries. Next, we have our FOIA requests. We responded to 10 FOIA requests. The first was from Nancy Thorner of Lake Bluff, Illinois. The second was from Nancy Thorner of Lake Bluff, Illinois. The third was from Nancy Thorner of Lake Bluff, Illinois. The fourth was from Nancy Thorner of Lake Bluff, Illinois. The fifth request was from Nancy Thorner of Lake Bluff, Illinois. The sixth was from Nancy Thorner of Lake Bluff, Illinois. The seventh was from Nancy Thorner of Lake Bluff, Illinois. The eighth was from Nancy Thorner from Lake Bluff, Illinois. The ninth was from Howard Handler, North Shore Barrington Association of Realtors. And the 10th was from Daniel Brook, Racket Club of Lake Bluff. Board members, are there any items you would like to see on future agendas? Seeing none, the announcements are Tuesday, June 28th will be our joint board workshop here at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And Tuesday, July 12th will be our next Board of Education meeting here at 7 p.m., preceded by our Board of Education workshop at 4 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.